What's up, everybody? My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knox Talks. Tonight's live production is brought to you in part by Prairie Sky Recovery Center, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan, the Community Addictions Peer Support Association, Stronger Together Canada peer-led support groups by Mom Stop the Harm, the Canadian Research Initiative in Substance Misuse, Quebec Atlantic Node, and Carter's Counseling. Tonight's guest, person in recovery and harm reduction advocate Chauncie Beaston from Richmond, Virginia, is here to share her story and what she is doing to advocate for harm reduction, and we are going to meet her right after this.
I spent 23 years living in addiction. 16 of those years, I worked as a Red Seal tradesperson in Saskatchewan and Northern Alberta. During that time, I made many mistakes and took more than a few hard knocks. I went from tradesman to business owner to hiding from gang members and dumpster diving. But with that lived experience, I've decided to try and make a change. I've dedicated my life to raising awareness and promoting change in the fields of substance use and psychological health and safety. So join me and my guests as we take off the blinders around mental health in our communities and at work, and shine a light on what's working and what's not working in the fields of mental health and occupational health and safety. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and I'll be your host, and this is Hard Knox Talks.
Okay, here's Chauncie. What's up, my friend?
Hi. I'm so nervous now.
What? You said you weren't nervous before.
I wasn't, and then the countdown started going, and I was like watching numbers, so now I'm gonna like woosah again. Okay.
Well, knowing that, is there anything that you'd like to say before we get started tonight?
I don't know. Maybe like some of my ideas might seem radical to some people, but I encourage you to do your own research with what I say and really come with an open mind. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. We don't all have to agree with each other.
We do not all have to agree to sit at the same table. Okay, let's jump in. Nothing like a little ominous music to calm the nerves.
Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine.
It's okay. It's
Great.
okay. So, before we get started into what you're doing now, why don't you give us a little backstory and tell us how this whole thing got started for you?
Okay, so it all started when I was born.
Hmm.
I grew up. My mom was married to my real father. It was a very abusive relationship, and we basically fled in the middle of the night. We were living in Las Vegas. I was a baby, and we came back to Virginia where her mom was. Um, and I think this is an important story for me to tell because, you know, addiction is usually caused by trauma, and I've had a lot of abandonment issues in my life. So after my mom left there, she ended up remarrying a man who was an alcoholic, and that was a very toxic relationship. I stopped hearing from my real father, and so I called this man dad, and they were together until I was about 12 or 13. And when they got a divorce, it got really messy, and she had to get a restraining order on him. So then that family stopped talking to me too. So in my mind, I was not lovable. Like something was wrong with me. I've had two fathers and two families abandon me.
Mhm.
And then she started dating this other guy that like he really didn't not like me, but I was like starting to be really wild because I had all of these issues. I suffered from depression and anxiety at a really young age. Um,
Mhm.
and I I started smoking pot, and
How old were you?
that was I think I was 13 or 14 when I started smoking pot, and I had
Mhm.
been drinking before that. I always say I started using at like 13 or 14. um and I don't really know why I always think of alcohol as different, but
Yeah.
um but I'd been drinking since middle school. And then I started smoking pot the summer after 8th grade, and it was finally like that, being able to escape and not feel my feelings, and I really enjoyed that. I got my first boyfriend, and he ended up being extremely abusive to me. I was 14 years old, he was 16. He used to beat me, and nobody believed me because he would do it like in private, and he would like kick me on my legs or hit me on my ribs. He would never hit me on my face, so like,
Mhm.
nobody could see what was going on until one night. He threw me down in a bathroom at a party, and finally like people started believing me. And some one of my friends' moms told their mom, and she told my mom. And I tried to get a restraining order on him, but because we weren't over 18, we didn't live together or have a kid together, like I couldn't get a restraining order on him. And it was really scary. I ended up, I had this guy who would later be my boyfriend that kind of just like protected me. Um, and so during high school, it was very common, like for me and my friends, like we were always drinking and smoking, and I tried pills and stuff like that. And I thought it was very normal. Apparently, not everybody was doing all of that. And I ended up getting pregnant at 16. I had my son when I was 17 years old. And when I had him, I had really bad postpartum depression. And so they gave me Percocet in the hospital. And when they
Mhm.
gave me those Percocets, like, that's when I was like, this is it. Like, it
That
took
flipped the
away
switch.
all of my, yeah, it took away all of my anxiety, all of my depression. And I was just like, I'm never going to be able to live without this.
Mhm.
And it really does show, like earlier when I had been using before, it was kind of an escape, but it wasn't really a coping mechanism in the way that it was when I had postpartum. And I think that that is really where that addiction started, with using that to cope. Um, so it was the pills for a little while, and then I would try other stuff. And one day
So,
I was,
were you getting them legally at first? Like, did they give you a prescription?
yeah, yeah, I had a prescription for them. And then this was back in a time where like you could get Percocet for a headache. Like
Mhm.
so like it was just always like pills were just always coming to me. Like, I drank a lot, and I was like constantly like, I don't know if I was breaking my ankle or spraining my ankle, but like I was
Mhm.
constantly in the hospital, like getting painkillers for my ankle because I would drink and I would fall. I would
So
fall.
you legit needed
Uh,
them.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if I needed it. I probably could have gotten away with Advil, but
Mhm.
I milked it for what it
Mhm.
was worth. And then it became where I would have to like buy them off of people. And I was staying at my mom had kicked me out, and I was like living in these people's closet in this apartment, and
Why'd
they
she kick
had
you out?
some name because I was just wilding out. And she was like, I'm sick of your shit, like your stuff. And you've got to go. Now she would let me stay at her house when on the nights that I had my son, because me and his father had split up,
Mm-hmm.
and he had him some of the time, I had him the other part of the time. So if I had him, I was allowed to stay at her house.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't, I had to find somewhere else to go. So I was like staying in this closet of some of some friends, and they had some neighbors that came over and brought cocaine over one night, and so it was like, okay, whatever. And they the guys that I was staying with wanted more coke, and the guys were like, well, we don't really do coke, we do heroin. And everybody there was like, well, we don't want to do heroin. Not me. I was like, what does that feel like? And they were like, it feels like a really strong Percocet. And my ears were just
Oh
like,
shit.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
because I love those.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like later on like went over to their house and I was like, you've got to let me try some of this heroin, like just like seeking it out, like I know. And like I wasn't like dependent on pills at this time, but I was just, like it wasn't that way, how some people are like prescribed and they get cut off and then they go to it. Like, no, it was just like I sought it out because I was just like, this pain and misery has got to stop, and this has got to be the answer.
Yeah.
And at the time it was, at the time it was the solution for my my depression and my anxiety. And hindsight would say there's better options for
Mm-hmm.
for depression and anxiety, but at that time that's what I used to cope with it. And I ended up just like moving in with those guys and staying there in their apartment. And like so then I would go home when I had my son, and when I on those nights I wouldn't do any dope.
Did you ever go into
um
withdrawal or anything when you were like,
n- not in the beginning. The first
huh?
time I ever got off dope, I did not go through withdrawals, because it was like I would do it for a couple days and then I'd go watch my son for a couple days. I never got dependent on it at that
And you could
time.
disassociate during that. You could put it down and go care for your son or your
Right,
child or
right.
yeah.
Right, yeah. At that time, I could, and
Yeah.
so that's what I did, and then it got to a point where I was just like, you know what, I probably shouldn't do this anymore, and I just like put it down, and I didn't touch it again for over a year. Um, and now during that time, I was, still smoking and drinking like every day, but to
Mm-hmm.
me I was just like, oh, this isn't a problem because it's not like I'm doing
It's not
heroin.
heroin. Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up getting an apartment with my best friend, and I was doing all right for a while, and i I can't even really remember how I got back on dope, but I got back on it, and it was not good this time. I was doing it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think eventually my best friend moved out, and my mom broke up with the guy that she had been dating, and she moved into my apartment. And that's when like everybody found out that I was doing dope, and they were like, you have to go to rehab or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Were
Unfortunately,
you like, oh no, it's not a problem, I got this, or were you like, no, you're
no, I was like, yeah, I'm not stopping this.
right?
But I really didn't have much of a choice at that time. So we tried to get me into rehab, but at that time there was no places for women to go.
Mm-hmm.
I either didn't have insurance, or I made too much money to for it to get covered. Like I was in like that little like gap that like there was just no help for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was gonna go to the methadone clinic, and I went to the clinic, and they were like, well, we're gonna put you in an IOP program. Um and you can do methadone, but we don't start patients on a Friday, so you're gonna have to wait till Monday. And I was like, well, that sucks. And my
Yeah.
mom was like watching me lock and key and was like, you're not going anywhere. So that time I had to withdraw. That was the first time I ever had withdrawals from dope, and it was awful.
Mhm.
And by the time though that Monday came, I was already through my withdrawals, because this was back when heroin was heroin.
Yeah.
And the withdrawals didn't last like fentanyl.
Hmm.
So I was just like, whatever, I'm not even going to do the methadone. I did the IOP program for a little while, and then I stopped going, because also during this time I was prescribed to uh, Xanax, Adderall, and Ambien.
Wow.
And I was misusing all three of these, and I went like super crazy and ended up leaving my apartment and going to stay in the projects, because I was going to be a rapper, and I had met these people that had a rap group, and
Hmm.
I was going to be a rapper.
Were you any good? I wish I would have known this before. I would have
No,
been like, drop some bars.
no, no, absolutely not. This was just like, my head was just so crazy thinking that
So
I was just gonna be like, Little Wayne was gonna find me, and it was,
maybe he would have, but not for rapping.
yeah,
So,
no,
but okay,
it was.
so did your doctor know? Because so you're getting Xanax and Ambien and these different things. Did your doctor know that you were struggling with substance use problems at that time?
No, because I wasn't. I was like going to like whichever doctor that you just go to once a month and they write you a script. Is that the psychologist or what?
I
I
don't know.
wasn't like going through like a counselor. It was just like straight up, like you would just be like, are these meds still working for you? And I'd be like, yes, they are.
Yes.
And they'd be like, okay. So while I'm sitting out there trying to be a rapper, I we got robbed one night, and I was like, I've got to get out of here. I'm gonna die. I had, like, a few months before that, I had found my dad through finding out I had a brother on MySpace.
Hmm.
And I connected with my real father, and so like one day I just like call him up after meeting him for the first time since I was like 2.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, hey, so I'm out here, I've got a drug problem, I'm about to die, can I come live with you? And he was just like, yeah, like, I've been waiting my whole life for you to do this. So I just like picked up and moved across the country to Las Vegas and went and lived with my real father. I had to leave my son here with his dad. Um, and I went and I stayed out in Las Vegas for about 9 months. And that was the first time that I'd ever gotten like completely sober, like completely abstinent.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that through getting hooked on Jesus.
Hmm.
Like, I got like, that whole family was like really into the church and stuff, but
So it was
like,
good for you then.
it was great for me.
Hmm.
It was great for me. I got to meet my real father, like heal that part of me that had been like hurting for so long. They're Mexican, so I got to see like a totally different culture. They've got a huge family. Like, it was such a great experience for me. And I loved it, but I had to come back out here because my son was here. So like
Hmm.
once I felt like I was pretty solid, I was like, I've got to be back for my son. So I came back out here, and um, as soon as I got back, I started drinking again,
Hmm.
every night. And because they were, I even though I had been abstinent while I was out there, and I wasn't doing the things here that were working for me there. I didn't go to church anymore. Like, I just started drinking immediately. There was no foundation of recovery at all. And eventually, I got my wisdom teeth taken out, and
Uh-oh.
they gave me Vicodin.
Uh-huh.
And everybody was like, be careful, be careful. I'm like, no, I'm never going down that road again. Um, literally, as soon as I took them, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going down this road again.
Yeah.
And so I got hooked back on pills for a while, and I was doing the OxyContin thing back when oxys were actually oxys.
Yeah.
And I thought it was okay though because it wasn't heroin. Even though I was shooting them up, it wasn't heroin, so it was okay. And then eventually
It wasn't
it
okay.
went back to eventually it went back to heroin because it was just like, this is too expensive. I'm just gonna do dope again. And I went back down that road for a good 7 years.
Yikes.
And I think in 2016 was when I got introduced to Narcotics Anonymous. And I went to one meeting and I was like, these people think they're so much better than me, these self-righteous people, and I just didn't go back. And then I went, I carried on with my addiction, and then I decided I was going to get on Suboxone. And when I got on Suboxone, that was such a great tool for me at that time. I got back to work. I was living my life like a normal person. I was taking care of my kid. It was really good for me. And then that's when somebody else that I was working with was also on Suboxone and they were going to NA. And I was like, well, maybe I should try this again. So I started going to NA and I liked it.
Did you tell people you were on Suboxone?
Yes, I did.
How'd that go over?
And that was the first time that somebody was like, oh, you're not really clean. You don't want to be on that forever. And wanting to fit in with these people, I weaned myself off of the Suboxone.
Oh, boy.
And I made it about 3 days before I ended up relapsing on dope again and OD'd a couple days later. So that would later carry on with me how I feel today about the way people treat people on Suboxone. So I ended up going back out. I would come back in the rooms, in and out, and then the end of my using, I found meth, which this is such an addict story. So I had met this guy at NA. We were dating for 2 weeks. He got kicked out of his recovery house. My mom was like, oh, he can just live with us and y'all can take your Suboxone together and heal. And so
a well-meaning, I'm sure.
Yes.
Of course. Yes.
So he ended up ODing in my bedroom at my mom's house. And this was before Good Samaritan law. So when I called 911, we both got arrested. And we were both I was put on pretrial. He wasn't put on pretrial. So I was it was coming up to where I was going to have to start taking drug tests. And I was I really need to get sober. So I tried to wean myself down on Suboxone. I made it to day 4 and I get a phone call. It's New Year's Eve. I get a phone call from some guy that I met in the NA. I hadn't talked to him in 9 months. And he was like, hey, do you have an ID? And this is 2 o'clock in the morning. He's like, hey, do you have an ID? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, do you think that you could come out here and buy some Sudafed and we'll give you some meth? And I was like, I don't do meth. I'm a dope head. Like, I don't want anything to do
I don't
with
do
your, like,
that.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
ew. So I was like, I'm on day 4, and like, I feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, it'll make you feel better. And I'm like, will it? No, I don't think so. And then, so I got off the phone and I told my boyfriend, and I was like, hey, the weirdest thing just happened. Like, this dude asked me if I wanted to buy some Sudafed and they would give me some meth. And he was like, I want to try meth. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it is New Year's Eve and
Oh
we're
boy,
not
yes.
drinking. So, like,
Solid
whatever.
logic.
I don't
Yeah.
like stimulants, so I'm not going to get hooked on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and bought the Sudafed, and the meth made me feel better. And I was like, you know what? This is going to help me get off heroin.
Mm-hmm.
So for a good 2 weeks, I did meth and I got off of heroin. Unfortunately, I got back on the heroin. I moved into the meth lab because my mom had kicked me out of the house. And now I was making and doing meth and heroin, and I was literally losing my mind.
Yeah.
It was so the psychosis was so bad that, like, when I would walk into a room, like, people would talk about shadow people, like, I would walk into a room and I would have to ask whoever was in there with me, like, if there was other people with us, because I couldn't tell if there was real people or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was coming up on pretrial was coming up, and I was like, I've got to go in somewhere. So I'm like driving around because I'm only allowed to stay at the trap house if I'm like making the meth, and like, so I'm like living out of my car too. And finally one night I called an old friend and was like, look, can you get me into this recovery organization? Like, I'm going to die and I've got to get myself together. And she was like, yeah, come here tomorrow. So I came to the recovery organization, and they were like, we will scholarship you for 2 weeks, but you have to go to detox. If you make it through detox, then you can come here. So I was like, okay. So I went to detox. I came back to the recovery organization, and that's when my recovery really started. And now that wasn't my last use. I ended up like relapsing after 30 days, went to jail for a pretrial violation, was in there for like 30 days.
So what did finally do it? Like, what was the last straw for you? Was there a rock bottom, or was there a moment of clarity, or what was it?
So yeah. So while I was sitting in the jail cell, I finally realized that, like, in my mind, I was constantly saying, like, don't do drugs, don't do drugs, don't do drugs. But like, all that was ever in my brain was drugs, 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 drugs. And I was just sitting on my bunk one night, and I was like, I need to switch my perspective to, I want to live a happy and fulfilling life. And so from then on out, like, that was my focus, was the happy, fulfilling life. And that's when things really, really switched for me. It was just sitting in there like, I don't want this to be my life. Like, I turned 30 in a jail cell, and like, I don't want this to be my life. Like, my son has had to watch me go through the psych ward, and now I'm in jail, and like, I am doing what my stepdad did to me. Like, I was put through so much trauma because of him, and I swore I would never be like him, and I am exactly like him, if not worse. And I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I got bonded out to another recovery house, and that's when I really was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I did use one more time after that. And the day that I used, the guilt and the shame was so bad that I couldn't even enjoy it. And I was like, that was that day. That was the day that I was like, this is no longer for me.
All right,
and
we're going to take
so
a
glad that
we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
So, how was your first year in actual
My
recovery?
my first year was very difficult. I had to fight with that depression and that anxiety. I had fun and I was very good at masking everything. Um, but it was tough, and I really I really worked hard though. I finally got on like antidepressants, which I will like shout to the rooftop that those things saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but it was good. It was tough, but it was good. I lived in the recovery house for 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was
So
there.
aftercare.
I was going to, yes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so I was there for a long time. I was going to meetings. I got a job at a cleaning company that I absolutely loved. I did not think that I would ever like cleaning, but I loved that job. I was assistant manager of the recovery house. I built back those relationships with my family. My son's father started trusting me again, and like I was able to see my son and build that relationship with him. um and it was a really positive experience. And I'm glad that I stayed in the recovery house for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not only did I not have anywhere to go, but it really helped me.
Yeah.
It really helped me like stay accountable and like learn how to be a person. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know people made their bed in the morning before they left the house. I didn't know that people wash their clothes and like don't just
Mm-hmm.
buy more so they don't have to wash them. And like just the simplest things I had never really learned. I didn't know how to do life at
Yeah.
all because all my life I'd been trying to avoid life.
So how was it? How was it when you left the sober house? Was that like, I don't know if I can do this, or did you leave like confidently, or what was that like?
Yeah, I left really confidently. There was a couple times that I was going to like leave and I knew that they weren't the right times for me to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Um and the opportunity presented itself to me and I knew it was time to move. Like I am a convicted felon. I have evictions on my record. My boyfriend is the same way. And because of networking with people in the recovery community, we were able to get a house to rent through a private renter. And it's a cute little house right in the middle of our like recovery community, and it was just perfect. And I knew that when I moved out, I was really going to have to focus on my recovery. So once I moved out, I started going to more meetings again because I was only going to a couple, you know, during the week when I was at the end of living at the recovery house. So I started going to more meetings. I started making sure that I was like hanging out with women in recovery, doing step work. And it was really a good experience. That transition, really, I had really solidified my foundation in recovery.
So at what point now, and like you didn't stay with the program forever. In fact, you moved away from the program. Um, at what point did you start to notice that there was a need to advocate for inclusive recovery?
So, it was when I joined TikTok, really.
Hmm.
So I joined TikTok, and all of these other pathways were like making themselves known because I was entrenched in just abstinence based recovery. I didn't realize that there was other forms of recovery and people were finding recovery through different ways and means. And then when I started listening to these other people and realizing that I had kind of stigmatized those groups, and I had pushed those people away, and how much harm I had actually caused to these different groups, that's when I started thinking to myself like, do I need to make a change?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started questioning a lot the program, and I I started looking into different pathways and like learning more about different modalities of
Mm-hmm.
what addiction and substance use disorder is. And I was like, I just can't, I don't really believe in these things that I'm saying, and this literature that I'm repeating anymore. And I just I wanted to finish my steps, but it just got to a point where I was like, this is not me being authentic or genuine, and I'm not just going to complete the steps for the sake of completing them when I don't
Mm-hmm.
really believe in this anymore.
Yeah.
So I made the decision that I wasn't going to go anymore, and I started doing a virtual meeting with a friend of mine that I met on TikTok on Thursday nights. It's called Alternative Recovery, and it's basically anybody from any pathway to come there and share however they please. And I was just like, this is what I want to do, and I want to check out other programs and see what they have to offer. I want to still be engulfed in recovery, but it was just time to spread my wings and
Mm-hmm.
expand and explore.
Yeah. So do you still like go to meetings sometimes, or are you just like completely that's over now?
Yeah, no, I do. I still go to meetings occasionally. Um uh I'm also starting, me and some friends, Ryan Riggs included,
He's
are
watching right now.
starting. Yeah, we have gotten together and we are putting together our own meeting called All Inclusive Recovery, because we want to expand access to people who maybe don't feel comfortable in the rooms anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, you know, the opposite of addiction is connection, and we want people to know like they have a community. And so we're really excited about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I lost my train of thought.
So no, I got you. I got you, sis. Don't worry. So tell us about some of the things you're doing now. Like you've just got a nonprofit approved. You're
Yes.
selling clothing on TikTok. You're dropping all kinds of TikToks every day. Tell us how did that get started? How did you get started on TikTok?
Okay, so I started with TikTok. I started as a recovery creator, and my name on there was Addict Named Chauncie.
Mm-hmm.
And I when I started, there wasn't that many recovery creators. And so I did a lot of like dark humor stuff, and it started to pick up, and uh, the market got very saturated.
Yeah.
And I had some people point out to me that maybe my content is actually stigmatizing. So, and I'm like, no, this is just how I cope. This is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
me being funny. But it made me take a look at what was going on, and I was like, oh wow,
Was that a hard look?
maybe I am. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a hard look, and it took me about 6 months for my ego to really be like, we're going to
Yeah.
make this change.
Yeah.
But like every time I would post, it would just be in the back of my head, like,
Like, yeah. Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't do this. And finally, I was just like, you know what? I'm just completely rebranding. And I started getting into harm reduction,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, I'm going to completely rebrand, and I want to shed light on harm reduction because I am funny.
Mm-hmm.
And and a lot of my friends who were harm reduction creators, they had great knowledge, and I was learning so much from them, but I wanted to be able to put it into a way that like people that maybe weren't as interested could get hooked into it because it was entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I changed my name on there to Live Laugh Naloxone, because I was like, I'm gonna like really work this brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard about a local harm reduction program in my area called the Health Brigade. And I was like, I'm going to make merch and I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to give 50% of the proceeds to Health Brigade, because at that time, I didn't really have the time to like do any kind of outreach or anything like that. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, but I knew that I wanted to help in some way. So I started selling the Live, Laugh, Naloxone merch. And it really took off. And the Health Brigade, shout out Zico, she, I met her and told her what I was doing, and she kind of like took me under her wing and was just like, like, we love what you're doing. And I was like, I want to start like a nonprofit of my own. And like, she really encouraged me to do that. And, a lot of people around me were like, yeah, just do it. So I decided that I wanted to start my own harm reduction nonprofit. Um, in Chauncie fashion, I'm doing it very slowly because I I have ADHD, and sometimes I can get way too ahead of myself, and then I get overwhelmed and I do nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm starting it out as just naloxone distribution. And there may be some underground other harm reduction services that I do. But the main thing right now is going to be expanding access of naloxone to like the rural areas, like where I'm from, because the city is very well taken care of by Health Brigade, and it's it's the rural areas that don't have as much access to it. So I want to expand it that way. And then eventually I would like to be a full comprehensive harm reduction program, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We got to make sure we've got a good solid foundation and, make it sustainable and then go from there.
So when you rebranded and you became very loud about harm reduction strategies, did you get any backlash?
Um I didn't get as much as I thought that I was going to get. And I'm very fortunate. The community that I'm in is a lot more progressive and open-minded than some of the recovery communities. So I've actually gotten a lot of positive feedback from it, which is great. And I really didn't expect that. I didn't expect it at all.
Yeah. So, if our viewers and listeners wanted to get behind you or wanted to reach out to you for whatever reason, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on TikTok or Instagram. Live, Laugh, Naloxone is my handle. TikTok is the best way to reach out to me. I've got, if you want merch, like this very
Amazing
fancy
merch.
shirt.
Amazing merch. Looks expensive. How much is it?
This shirt is like $20.
Cool.
Is that expensive?
No, I'm just talking shit. I do that.
Yeah, I go through a third party, and like my like profit margins are very low because they charge so much. So I try to get the best prices that I can. But you can buy merch at livelaughNaloxone.org. And 50% of the proceeds go to the Health Brigade in Richmond, Virginia, and the other 50% are going into my nonprofit, which is the Where You're At Foundation, which, like we just said, it's just getting going. I literally just got approved a couple weeks ago, so there's a lot, a lot of work to be done, but we're doing it.
Yeah, we're just throwing your website address in the chat here for you. You got it?
Awesome! Thank you.
All right. So, I think that's about it. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with tonight?
Yeah, I would just say that if something is working for you, stick with it. And if you're working a program that may not be working for you, it's okay to try other things. Like, just don't give up. When it comes to recovery, it's a journey, and there's ups and downs. Like, just don't give up. Don't beat yourself up. Like, we've all gone through the ups and downs. There's nothing morally wrong with you. You are loved and you are worthy.
Awesome. Okay, Chauncie, well, it was great having you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us tonight, and we will let you go. Take care, my friend.
Thank you so much.
There is power in numbers. If you would like to contribute to ending the stigma around emotional pain, please subscribe to our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram. Find us on all audio podcast platforms. Like and comment your thoughts on our posts. Let us come together with our lived and living experience as a resource that has the power to engage new thought processes, to promote new ideas, to broaden the spectrum of care, and to show the world that the lie is dead. We can recover. There is a safer way, and we're here to show you how. Good night.